President Trump canceled a scheduled press conference at the G20 summit in Buenos Aires, Argentina today, citing the death of former President George H.W. Bush. In the tweet, he said, out of respect for the Bush family, he would, quote, wait until after the funeral to have a press conference. The summit wrapped up with world leaders agreeing on some trade issues, but not unanimously on a host of other issues, including climate change. NewsHour Foreign Affairs and Defense correspondent Nick Schifrin joins us now from Buenos Aires. Nick, usually there are these communiques about what the entire conference does agree on. In this case, there were a lot of things that we didn't agree on. So how did we get over that impasse, and what's on the piece of paper?
Yeah, three or four main disagreements. You mentioned one of them, climate change. Basically, there is a G20 and a G19. The G19 is the reference to the 19 countries that are either in the Paris Climate Accord or support the Paris Climate Accord, and the United States. And this communique got over that difference by just acknowledging that the U.S. is not going to support the Paris Climate Accord. And that is language, Hari, that we've seen in the past as well. On migration, this was a real red line, according to multiple diplomats that I've spoken to from the U.S. side. The U.S. Sherpa, as he's known, the diplomat who's negotiated this deal, basically said that he cannot have a in-depth discussion of migration, a global migration crisis requiring a global migration response, because he didn't want the president to read that and get angry. And so the language that everyone decided on is very basic. All it does is say that the G20 will study migration into the future. And the other big one was trade and steel. On steel, they didn't really accomplish very much, frankly. They said again that we'll study this issue. And on trade, this was the most difficult. The U.S. Objected to any kind of use of the word protectionism. China was on the other side, pushing for language that endorsed free trade. And the compromise was this: a recognition of the contribution of multilateral trading. That doesn't sound like much, but that took days, according to diplomats, to get just that one sentence. And that meant that they could get to this sentence: system is falling short of the objectives, meaning the multilateral trading system is falling short of the objectives. That allowed China and the U.S. to agree on one thing that they never have agreed on before, which is reforming the World Trade Organization.
And Nick, it's while you and I are talking right now is about the same time that the president is starting to have a conversation, hopefully, with President Xi of China. What are we expecting out of that conversation?
Yeah, so we are taping this right as that conversation begins. And both sides are indicating that they want to make a deal. We heard Robert Lighthizer, the trade representative, who's been a real hawk on China, yesterday say he'd be very surprised if a dinner was not a success. I spoke to a senior Chinese official just a few minutes ago who said that I hope and believe this meeting will play a positive role for a bilateral relationship. And look, a lot of officials are calling this now the new Cold War between the U.S. and China. That is not going to end tonight over dinner. But what you could see, Hari, if what is being indicated by both sides come true, is a kind of ceasefire. What does that look like? The U.S. suspends tariffs that are supposed to start on January 1st, and China begins to buy products that it stopped buying, things like soybeans and energy products. And the larger problems, everything, as you know, from intellectual property to China's military expansion in the South China Sea to the Belt and Road, well, those issues will simply have to wait for another day.
All right. And finally, Nick, what is the news of the death of George H.W. Bush? How is that being received here? Because many of these countries, obviously, these countries have long relationships with the United States. Some of the leadership might still remember him.
Yeah, a lot of the leaders actually not only still remember him, those who have been around to remember him, but also newer leaders. So we heard Emmanuel Macron of France, who's in his early 40s, who I don't believe ever actually worked with George H.W. Bush. He said that he went up to President Trump and said, we're sorry for your loss and we condole. And then you heard the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, call H.W. Bush one of the fathers of unification as his role at the end of the Cold War in unifying Germany. And so just as we're seeing in Washington, here in Buenos Aires, from all of these leaders who represent 80% of the world's GDP, an outpouring of sympathy conveyed to President Trump.
NewsHour Foreign Affairs and Defense correspondent Nick Schifrin joining us from Buenos Aires tonight. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much.